All right, looks like GGG is getting vengeance for being made fun of for giving Cleave +2 to radius. Cleave needed way more than +2 to radius, but what they did to buff Cleave in 3.19 is they gave it +2 to radius. I personally laughed for at least 20 minutes when I saw this update. 20 minutes of laughter over the fact that they added the most pointless buff to a gym that I've ever seen in the history of GGG. Well, it seems like they wanted to actually make Cleave do bonkers range. So they have Cleave of Rage. Now with Cleave of Rage, it drops the flat damage that is added at the bottom, but then it increases the attack damage effectiveness to 300% from like 220. So you get 80% more attack damage effectiveness, so it should offset that loss in flat damage at the bottom. But what is important about this is you get 0.1 meters of radius per 3 rage, and 2 rage if you hit an enemy. So it's going to be an auto rage generator, and you're going to get a bunch of radius. Now, in the version I'm going to be using, I have 115 rage. I'm going to round it up to 120 just for simplicity. And if we take a look at this image here, my Cleave without any AOE is going to be right here at the 4 meter mark, and when I add AOE to it, it's going to go off screen. I'm going to be off screening with Cleave, which is going to be great for ultimatum. It's going to be great for the new league mechanic, I'm pretty sure, because when I'm in that little dark circle, I'll be able to swing around the edges and wreck everybody. And it should be relatively inexpensive. I can't imagine too many people doing this. Now, I'm going to be using these 2 Rigwald weapons, which should be 1C on day 1. And then I'm going to pair that with the Bringer of Rain helmet, which is what's going to get my 4 sockets, which is going to give me a 7 socket Cleave situation. And I'm going to be playing a Berserker. I don't have any jewels in. This is just a rough estimate. This is how I'm going to path through, probably. And I'm going to grab these bad boys because this has 12% attack speed, and it gives me my leech. These bad boys are a bit awkward. Bleed duration, I don't really care too much about the bleed duration, but bleeding enemies cannot inflict bleed on you, so this is bleed immunity. And if I wanted to, I can grab 10% less damage taken over time, which I do really like because damage over time is a huge annoyance for me. I'm going to path through, get an additional 10 rage here. I'm going to grab this for the spell suppression. I'm going to pimp down over to here just to get 40% more attack damage. I don't intend on critting. These weapons have 5 base crits, so in order to add crit to this, it's going to be a bit of a problem. And since this is just my starter, I'm definitely not going to be adding any crit. And not too much else is special. I'm going to be grabbing these war cries. Now, if we take a look at some of the verbiage, obviously our rage is going to be tripled, which is going to give us a pretty big life degen. We pop this off, and we got 600 life regeneration. So we got about a 500 life degen from the lose 1% of life or 0.1% of life per second per rage when you're not losing rage. But I think we'll be all right. We got a lot of life leech. We got enough regen, so we're not losing life. But here's where it gets a bit nutty. War cries grant 10 rage per 5 power if you have less than 25 rage. So that's going to get us ramped up to 25 rage very quickly. Sacrifice 10 rage if you have at least 25 rage. Exerted attacks deal 50% more attack damage if a war cry has sacrificed rage recently. So essentially, this is going to give me 50% more attack damage. Now, it's not pulling up into my POB, and I don't really know why. There must be like an exerted attack section that I don't see. I don't see where you exert attacks. So we just know that it's gonna be 50% more than whatever this full DPS number is. And on top of that, I'm gonna be using Intimidating Cry. This is all just, I'm not gonna link this or anything, but Intimidating Cry. Enemies taunted by this war cry are intimidated. Counts total power of enemy in range. Buff causes your hits to overwhelm 5% of physical damage reduction per 5 power, up to 30%. Exerts the next 2 melee attacks you can perform. Exerted attacks deal double damage. So I don't think this is also calculating into POB, One of the main reasons I don't use a lot of POB is I don't really know how to use it. I don't know where exert is. I don't know how to make that war cry, make my damage do double. Somewhere around here, there's got to be an exert function. So I'm guessing 1.5 to 2.5 million damage with this current setup. Obviously, I have 2 empty jewel slots. I'll be able to apply something in there, but it takes me quite a while to start getting really good jewels. I usually don't get that until week 2. Week 1, I'm mostly just primarily focusing on leveling and completing my atlas. And then week 2 is where I usually transition into a more of an end game build. Now, to transition this into an end game build, all I really have to do is replace these silly weapons that I'm using simply because they exist. I might drop the sword, which does the damage over time multiplier for bleeding per rage, which I get a pretty good bleed going here, 70,000 if the enemy's moving. So it's not an unnoticeable amount of difference, but it's mostly unnoticeable. So I can replace this sword with the Veritism or whatever that stupid sword is called that counts as all weapon types. And in that regard, I can grab some of these axe nodes that will increase my damage. And I'm going to be running this guy here for skills cost life instead of mana, skill reserves life instead of mana, remove all mana, 50% increased life reservation of skills. And then I don't know what any of this other stuff does, but I am going to be using that. I might pop over here and grab this guy down over here, remove all the energy shield, gain maximum life instead of maximum energy shield from equipped armors, depending on the armor that I end up eventually using. But it looks like I am not... oh, there it is. Total life is getting a huge chunk, so I probably won't use that. And this build should get me into Endgame pretty easily. It might be a bit squishy with only 4,000 life, but again, I just have placeholders here. I'm not going to be using the hoops. I'm probably not going to be using Carnage Heart. I'm not going to be using these boots. Probably not going to be using these gloves. So all these are just going to be yellow items, but I really hate crafting yellow items, so I just put them there as placeholders. One of the main reasons I want to do this is I think it's going to be fantastic to have Cleave cover the whole screen. Now, this is just one variation. Now, the other variation that I could do, I think I created a new one. We can do a Slayer, which has the same paper DPS, but the Slayer's not going to be getting the 50% more damage from the Warcry situation, so the Slayer is going to be doing a lot less damage than the Berserker. But obviously, Slayer is going to have way more life. And with the Slayer... has a couple better options because in my opinion the Slayer can grab either Master of Metal for more impale or this bad boy right here, and then I could stack into some block and then get lucky damage. That could be tasty. Lucky damage is always nice, and then you can use the volatility support gem. But the reason I'm not going into Violent Retaliation, and I don't plan on doing that, is I'm using the Bear Grylls belt, which gives me 20 rage, and not the Rough Losses coil, which gives you a bunch more attack damage. But there's a lot of options in the Slayer, and I mean in the Duelist, and I typically like the Duelist just a little bit more than the Marauder. So for instance, if I play the Marauder and I am playing the Berserker, I can steal from the Chieftain. This node's pretty good. I actually really like this node too. It removes ignites from hitting me, and then I can pretty much not run Purity of Ailments because ignite's the big scary one. You can get rid of shock pretty easy, and you can just kind of ignore cold, or you can steal this bad boy so you're not getting frozen and you don't slow down a lot. Stealing Unstoppable is usually pretty inexpensive. Not a lot of people grab this one. Undeniable, however, is very expensive, so don't plan on getting this anytime soon. We're talking 40 divines for the whole set, usually about there. So yeah, this is probably going to be my starter. I have a couple other starters in mind that I might do. We have the... Let's take a look at... Frenzy, but they haven't released Frenzy yet. Well, that's the wrong one. It says this guy here, more attack speed and more damage per frenzy charge, But in the patch notes, we look at Frenzy, and Frenzy quality now provides 2% more attack damage and attack speed per Frenzy charge instead of 10% increased attack speed. So we have, I believe, a bit of a disparity. So that's 7%, 2% more, 7% more attack damage per Frenzy charge, 7% more attack speed. So I don't really... Oh, maybe that's not the quality, is it? That's just the standard. It's not saying what the quality is. I don't know what it's saying. But either way, the patch notes seem to be a bit different than... Maybe that 7 will go to 9. But either way, with this extra 2% more attack damage, if you have 10 Frenzy charges, which is not that difficult to get, you'll get to 8 real easy. On this build, I'd be playing a Trickster. You get to 8 really easy. 10 takes a little bit more effort, but you can get to 10. And at 10 Frenzy charges, you're going to be getting 20% more attack damage and 20% more attack speed. That is extremely powerful. Now, if you up the quality by using Dahlia's body armor, you get another 30%, and that 30% is going to be another 2.5 if it gives you 2.5s. If it doesn't, then it's just be another 2. And then you could throw a enhance in there, the green support, and that's going to pop this all the way up to like 6% more attack damage and attack speed per Frenzy, or 5, between 5 and 6. And if you have 10 Frenzy charges, that's going to be 50% more attack damage and 50% more attack speed. So a Trickster Frenzy build doing poison and grabbing Perfect Agony and just grabbing all these hybrid physical and poison nodes here could be a very powerful, I guess I'd call it a bosser, because I don't think I'm going to come all the way over to here to get the splash, and I'm probably not going to put splash on there. So I might do a 4 link of Reeve and then a 6 link of Frenzy. So Reeve to clear out the packs and the Frenzy to clear out the bosses. So that could also be a league starter. So I'm toying those two in my head. And then I have a third one. So if we take a look at these patch notes, let's go to the original jewels. Where are you? Cold Snap of Power. I absolutely love this. Now, I got a little excited because on the PoE planner, for some reason, I just forgot. It obviously doesn't work that way, but my mind kind of zoned out in my mind, and I got like a half a second. I was super excited for this +3 level to all critical support gems. I totally forgot it said support gems. I thought it was just +3 level of all critical gems. And if you look at the new gem, it now got a critical tag, which it didn't have before. So I saw that critical tag. I saw the 10% chance to do critical strike, and I got super excited. But even without that +3 to levels, which is bonkers, because Cold Snap levels enhance the damage extremely big. Extreme levels. So let's take a look. They didn't modify any of this. So Cold Snap PoE. If we take a look at these levels, level 20, you're at 21. You get another 300 damage just for one level. So if you got that +3, it would go from 2160 to 3104. That's 1,000 top in cold damage. But if you can get this bad boy to like level 26, you are hitting like a dump truck. And if you look at this curve, it goes straight up. So you want to try to get to level 30 before it kind of it curves off a little bit. So if you can get a level 30 Cold Snap, you're going to be doing a ton of damage. So from level 20 to level 30, it is bonkers. Now they have an item called a Replica Cold Iron Point that does +3 to Replica Cold Iron Point. +3 to cold damage, if I remember correctly. +3 to cold skills. So you can just grab 2 Replica Cold Iron Points. I don't think too many people are going to be using these, because I think a lot of people are doing Cold Dot, and I think a lot of people just assume Cold's dead now because of Vortex's change. And this might be really inexpensive. This Cold Iron Point could be really inexpensive. And adding 6 levels to Cold Snap, and if you have 1 level before, it's just so much damage. So if you have a level 21 Cold Snap, and then you add 6 levels to that, you're going to level 27 super easily. 4,995 cold damage. That's going to be huge. And then you pair that bad boy with what class? Of course, we're going to pair it with the Inquisitor. Drop that in quiz. Right here, critical strikes ignore elemental resistances. And you can probably do that, and then that, or if you want that, like so. And then when you get really rich, you're going to swing over and grab this for the end game, because it's going to give you +1 to power charges. But one thing that's important and special and magical is this has a base critical strike chance of 10%, which means that you barely have to lift your finger to get to 100% critical strike chance. And it has 50% chance to gain a power charge on critical strike. So this plus power charge support, you're going to have a 100% chance to gain a power charge on critical strike. So every hit will be a critical strike, because getting to 100% crit is going to be super easy with a 10% base critical strike chance. So every hit's going to be a crit. Every hit is going to ignore elemental resistances, and every hit is going to give you a power charge to keep this bad boy going. Now, if you fine tune it just a bit, I think I actually built a quick little Glad Frenzy. I know, maybe I didn't. No, I did not. Slayer, Trickster. I did not create one. Oh, well. But if you play the Inquisitor, you're going to be able to get to 100% crit chance so easy. This has an added effectiveness of 320%, which is absolutely huge. And yeah, excellent spell here. So out of all the ones I've seen here, I think I'm most excited for Cleave, for the massive AOE, and for Cold Snap, because you're going to be able to cast this using power charges instead of frenzy charges. And then also, is it on this section? No, they haven't revealed it yet. And then Frenzy. So whatever Frenzy is, they haven't revealed that one yet. That'll be in batch 3 or 4 or 10. It's not like the league's coming up in a few days and they're still making changes. It's got to be kind of stressful to work at GGG sometimes. But anyways, Berserker Cleave is looking to be my starter. And I'm going to be able to clear massive screens. But Slayer is also pretty interesting. You lose a lot of the double damage, but with Slayer, you can grab this bad boy. And this is going to give you the 50% increased global accuracy, which is super nice for Precise Technique. Precise Techniques probably gets dropped at the end game, but Precise Technique is really good at early game because you don't want to mess with all that crit shit. It takes a lot to get really good crit damage, and that's like in-game stuff. It's always better for me to start without crit and then eventually get into crit. But this bad boy right here, going to give you more meters to strike range, which you don't really need because you have a ton from the Cleave. But it's also going to give you 5% increased area of effect per enemy killed up to 50%. So you get 50% increased area of effect and then 15% more melee damage to enemies based on proximity. I'd imagine that based on proximity means in proximity of the whole skill. So the more AOE your skill has, the farther away you can hit to get that 15% damage. So I imagine that 15% is applied over 100% of your range. And at 100% of your range, you get a 0% bonus. And at 0% of your range, you get 15% more bonus. So you're probably going to be hitting at 1% of the range when you're fighting a boss and you're up close. That's my assumption of how it works. I don't actually know how it works. But this impact is going to be pretty powerful. And so is this attack speed. So I actually kind of like the Slayer better, but losing out on all that double damage and all that Warcry stuff and all that screaming and all that movement speed that you get from having 115 rage. And on the Slayer, you would only have 105 rage, so you'd have a little bit less rage. But having all that rage, it's probably going to be very strong. And another thing about that is going to be very inexpensive, and it should be pretty fail-proof until you get to red maps. At minimum, you can have enough damage to get to T16 maps, And then you might run into some survivability problems. When you run into survivability problems, you can do a bunch of different stuff to fix that as you go through. But yeah, that is the starter. I went a little too long because, you know, I'm very excited. I am very excited. Did they make any fundamental changes to Melee? No, they didn't make any fundamental changes to Melee. But some of these Melee gyms are popping off, do seem pretty hot. It's just a little too bad. But Cleave wasn't one of the ones that had a problem. It's mostly the slam skills. But anyways, that is all. I will check you guys later.